actually the start of season 2 of Fish and Grits, the podcast.
2021, baby.
We took some time off there to enjoy the holidays, spend some time with our family, and just actually watch sports for the sake of watching for once, instead of thinking, what do I have to talk about? What can I talk about here? Today is January 5th. The good thing about that is today is the end of all your political ads. No more being bombarded by commercials via radio, via television, text messages.
No more forest being slaughtered to fill our mailboxes with political
propaganda. But today we're kicking off season 2 with a bang. We've got a very special guest coming on, and this is a man that we've been wanting to talk to for quite some time. Tonight's guest has been with the Hawks Radio Network as a pregame, halftime, and postgame host, as a game commentator. And as a game commentator since 2014. He is also the managing editor of Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
92.9 The Game.
And is a radio play-by-play voice of Atlanta United FC. He hosts game broadcasts on on the Atlanta Falcons, calls play-by-play on the radio for the WNBA Atlanta Dream, and serves as an announcer for the Pennsylvania Cable Network. Some of his bigger games, for those of you who are trying to guess who this is, in our Atlanta sports history, he has called the 2018 MLS Cup Final and the 2018 MLS All-Star Game. He has won multiple Gabby Awards, the most recent being in 2019 from the Georgia Association of Broadcasters for the best play-by-play, and the other two dating back to 2015 and 2017 for Hawks broadcasts. Please welcome a literal man of many hats, Mike Conti.
The incomparable.
Man, I'm embarrassed. Where'd you find that bio? That's crazy. I sure as didn't write it. No, it's great to be on with you guys. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to chopping things up with you. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Quick question about the bio. A lot of times, they do like that wiki thing, and people are like, well, that's not true. That wasn't true. Was everything we said true?
Everything you said was true. I'm a little embarrassed by it. Let's not dwell on it. Let's get into it. I've been really, really lucky. The radio station 92.9 The Game has given me a lot of opportunities to do incredible things that I never even imagined I would get to do. Whether it be, it's not a positive memory, obviously, but the Super Bowl. I mean, to be able to work a Super Bowl was pretty crazy. And, what I've been able to do with the Hawks and Atlanta United. I'm so lucky it's stupid, but this isn't about me. This is about what you guys want to talk about. So.
Which is you.
Yeah, luckily, that's you, Mike.
I'm just not that interesting, I don't think. But
okay. Lies.
You forget many of us have done research on you, and also listen to you almost every day.
Oh,
where's your trophy case at?
Yeah. I wherever my wife and the dogs keep all the dry goods in storage, I guess. I don't know. I get really uncomfortable about those awards because I don't do what I do for awards. I do it because I love doing it. I love connecting with our listeners and Atlanta sports fans. I mean, that's why we all do this, right? I mean, you guys don't do Fish and Grits for awards. You do this because it's a lot of fun and you like the interaction, right?
Yeah,
Thanks.
I mean.
We'd love to get awards and money with it, but
yeah, true. Mike's forgetting to throw that in there. I do all this for fun, but they also pay me. So
yeah, that the fortunate thing for me is I have a wife who does really, really well professionally. So I'm like, when I talk about how lucky I am to the point of it being stupid, I actually don't really even do this for the money because I just live off my sugar mama, basically.
Nice setup.
So when I was doing some of my research on you, Mike, I was like, okay, he does this, he does that, he's done this. Yeah, I know all this. Oh, he also does this, this, and this. And my first question was like, is there ever a time you don't work or you don't not work?
Yeah. And that's funny. I talk about my wife and on top of her being my sugar mama, she's also incredibly patient. Because I do work a lot. And, it really, really gets tough during Hawk season because the Hawks are playing either every night or every other night. It's a little bit different this year because the radio crews in the NBA aren't traveling. But, when you're traveling, shoot, I mean, especially when it's overlapping with Atlanta United right before the pandemic hit in March. I mean, a typical week for me would be like I was in Minneapolis with the Hawks on a Monday night. They played on a Tuesday night. They traveled to Boston on Wednesday. They played in Boston Thursday. So I was in Minneapolis and Boston during the entire week, flew home Friday, and then drove to Birmingham to do an Atlanta United game. The following day did another Hawks home game, and then got right back on the plane to go to Orlando. And then from Orlando, I went down to Fort Lauderdale to do Atlanta United. Then I flew up to Cleveland. And you don't see your family when you're doing that. I mean, FaceTime's great and talking on the phone's great, but you're still away from home. And that part is really, really tough. The fact that we aren't traveling this year in the NBA, and we did not travel this season post-pandemic for Atlanta United because of the COVID protocols. I mean, I obviously hated not being at the venue for road games. I think it makes calling the game a lot tougher. I think the broadcast suffers as a result. I hope that's something that doesn't happen permanently. But from a personal standpoint, it's been a huge break because it takes 3 40-hour-a-week jobs, and it makes it maybe the equivalent of like 2 40-hour-a-week jobs. And you do get a little more time, for personal things, which is really, really helpful. But I wouldn't be working that hard if I didn't love doing it. Does that make sense? I know you guys could probably relate to that too. If I hated doing it, I'd be a miserable prick right now. The fact that I love doing what I do is why. I mean, I have to work hard because I'm not as talented as others. So I have to work hard to overcome that difference. I'm not.
Wait. When you say you're not talented, just not even to be facetious. I mean, what is the quality that you would say that another person might have that you don't, that you would say?
Well, for one, the ability to call a game accurately and, without any verbal slip ups or anything like that. Like if you listen to the guys who do play-by-play in this city, whether it be, I'm just talking about the radio guys, Jim Powell, Brandon Ingram, Steve Holman, who I work with on Hawks, Wes Durham, Dave Archer, obviously, and not to leave out Don and Joe Simpson and everyone involved in the Braves broadcast. You're talking about people who are so polished with the English language. They're never grasping for words. They're never at a loss for a way to describe something fluidly. I get sometimes too emotional and too passionate that I end up kind of becoming a fan more than a descriptor. And fortunately, I work for people who I guess find that to be entertaining.
Right. You make a lot of the highlights, the Atlanta United highlights.
Well, I'm grateful for that. And I hope my passion for it kind of comes through on those highlights. But man, I mean, I have to prepare probably twice as hard as Wes and Steve and Jim and Brandon because I never played the game. For soccer, I mean, I played up until I was in the 8th grade, but that doesn't qualify me to understand anything about how Major League Soccer works. And thank God Jason Longshore has helped kind of coach me along the way. But I have to prepare twice as hard as those guys because those guys understood the game better than I did. And I don't ever want to go into a broadcast booth unprepared to accurately describe and contextualize what I am seeing to the listener. And furthermore, I want the listener to feel kind of what I'm feeling as I'm watching and describing everything on full. So to do that, I just have to work harder. And I still need to work harder. I think, if you guys follow me on Twitter, I hope you do. But if you don't, I don't blame you. I think I try very, very hard to tweet statistics, to tweet quotes, to tweet things that aren't really arguable because I'm not smart enough to get into sports debates with people. I can just present facts and let people run with those facts as they will. So that's kind of where I'm at on all that. I just feel like if I don't work as hard as I do, I'm going to wash out of these booths really, really quickly, and my dream job's going to go away, and that's going to be it, because you really only get one chance to do things like this, I think.
True. That's a really good point that you made about the radio / TV aspect, because when you're listening on the radio, you have to be so descriptive. And you got to constantly give the score. You got to constantly, because when you're on TV, they can sort of, take a second to just, say something funny or do this, or, maybe break away and talk about something else. But when you're on the radio, it's constant, right?
Yeah. And it's funny. Steve and I were talking about this last night before we went on the air with that Hawks game, because I think we're really kind of concerned about what our roles are going to be going forward, if we're going to be able to travel again once the pandemic ends, or if this working from home thing is going to be permanent, which Steve and I both hope will not be the case. We enjoy traveling. But the one thing that I said last night is they've got to let us travel, because we have to describe everything. Mm-hmm. We have to describe everything. We are the eyes for the listener. If you're driving in your car and you're listening to us, or if you're cleaning your garage and listening to us, or if you're sitting on the beach in Cancun and you're streaming us on the radio, we're your eyes. We have to describe everything. We can't be at the mercy of what the television director decides that we need to see. But I think that's part of what makes radio play-by-play so fun, because it does allow you to not only be descriptive in a unique way that TV guys don't really need to be, because the pictures speak for itself, but I think it creates a storytelling aspect that almost makes it theatrical. So if you're like me, who has a little bit of a background from high school, working in stage productions, in a way, it's kind of similar to being on stage. There is a theatrical element to it, because you're trying to entertain the listener. We understand that the listener has an option to either listen to us or watch on television. I want people to have fun listening to me, so they'll choose me over the alternative, which is TV. I want to do something that they aren't going to get on the television broadcast, in other words. So to your point, yeah, that I think it all kind of goes hand in hand. You have to describe everything, which means you got to get the words out quickly. But I think, again, because you are the eyes of the listener, you can take a little bit of dramatic theatrical license and maybe make moments as big as they seem to me as I'm watching. Right. I get to make the decision for the listener. This is a big moment.
I mean, you do an excellent job, in my opinion. You
Thank you.
You paint the picture quite well for us. I want to go back to something you said earlier when you had mentioned tweeting statistics. Mm-hmm. And just recently, I believe it was one of the Twitter pages or one of the local Atlanta Instagram pages, I forget who it was, took your stats and posted them as their own information. And yep. I've never respected someone more than you actually going and taking claim of that information.
I didn't do that for me, by the way. I did that for all the other content creators in this city and in this state who have their content pirated by that particular account. That wasn't about me. That was about, even just a few hours before, the Channel 2 meteorologist who had a photo taken directly off his Twitter and retweeted by them with no credit. Look, guys, you know this because you're in this industry with me. We have to work really, really hard to curate content. I'm not all about some account with 1.5 million followers just taking my content and passing it off as their own with no credit. I'm not trying to build my followers, but, they could have just retweeted me or they could have tagged me. And if it were a one-time occasion, I probably would have let it slide. But I have a real problem with that. There's I think you have to uphold kind of a professional courtesy to everyone else who does what we do. We're all in this for the same reason. We're trying to entertain and inform our audience. And I really have a problem with people who take the hard work of someone else. And look, I mean, we're talking about me going on to Pro Basketball Reference and spending 10 minutes digging up a stat. I mean, it's not like I dug a ditch or anything like that. But there are other people who work very, very hard to curate content that then gets pirated by someone else's account. Yeah. I just can't stand for that. And I know the rules of engagement on social media are maybe a little bit different than, say, in a newspaper or on a television station. But I have a lot of respect for the people who try to do things the right way and give credit to the people who curate that content. I just think that's incredibly important from a professional standpoint.
Oh, I totally agree with that. There has to be like a decorum, and it's just, yeah, there's nothing worse than a person who, because, you know, a lot of these people are making money to just come and nip someone else's material and it's just post it up like they did some work, you know.
Just be good enough to have your own material stand on its own. That's all you have to do.
Right.
You know, I'm tweeting a stat about a basketball game. You know, you guys are putting this podcast together. Just all we have to do is be good enough with the information that we provide our audience, and the followers will come, I think.
True. So we're so familiar with, every time you hear your voice, you almost have like an iconic voice in this city. In this city, at least, when we hear you, we know it's you.
God help this city if that's the case.
So I want to, you know, for the people listening, I want to sort of like go behind the veil a little bit and sort of go to a time before broadcasting and sort of get to know what was a young Conti like. Like, can you give us some things about, did you play sports? Where did your passion for, you know, broadcasting arise from? Can you just sort of give us like, you know, your day one to before broadcasting type of background?
It's funny because I think I've always wanted to be a broadcaster, and I think that became very apparent to my parents at probably age 4 or 5 when I would watch TV and try to commentate as a 4 or 5-year-old on the games that I was watching. You know, I'm one of those kids that we probably all know at least one kid like this who grew up as a young boy or young girl listening to the radio at night to a baseball game as he was trying to fall asleep. And in my case, it was actually ice hockey. I grew up in Philadelphia. So my childhood nights were all about listening to the radio and listening to Gene Hart call Philadelphia Flyers games. From as long as I can consciously remember, that's what I've always wanted to do. It also became very clear to me at a very young age that I had no athletic ability whatsoever. So even though I love sports, you know, I had to find a different way to be a part of sports. And I, you know, I'm proud to say that, you know, my younger brother, who is 2 years younger than me. I mean, he's the senior director of communications for the Indianapolis Colts. He's kind of in the same boat as I, where, you know, we both wanted so badly to chase this dream of being in professional sports. He had more athletic ability than me, but I don't think he played football beyond the 10th grade. He wasn't a very big kid. He did play high school tennis, but I think we just were aware enough to know, look, we're not going to get a scholarship as a Division I athlete. We're not going to be professional athletes. We need to find another way to be involved in what we love, and we did. But as far as me as a kid is concerned, I grew up in Philadelphia. Like I said, you know, huge sports fan of the 4 teams in Philadelphia specifically. I grew up as a Penn State fan from birth, basically, because my parents both went there, and I ended up going to Penn State and graduating in 2003. You know, I was a dorky kid, didn't have much athletic ability, didn't really have a lot of friends, played video games, played computer games, stuff like that. I mean, my childhood was pretty unremarkable, but what I was very, very fortunate that I grew up in a town where I could go work at the commercial radio station in town at a relatively young age, the age of 16. And by the age of 17, I was doing play-by-play for football and basketball. So I was really, really lucky. I got a head start. By the time I got to Penn State, when I enrolled in college, I already had 2 or 3 years of play-by-play experience. I didn't have to work at the student radio station. I could just keep working at the commercial radio station. I really
real quick. Was when you were at 16, so what kind of games were you broadcasting? Was this like local high school football?
High school football and basketball.
Okay.
And I didn't have a freaking clue what I was doing. I thought I sounded great. I had no idea what I was doing.
You still have tapes?
I do. It's funny. I'm still trying to clean up this home office because I thought I'd only have to use it for a month, and now we're in month 11. And in my garage, I found an old box of cassette tapes, so now I have to find a cassette player to be able to listen back to it. But no, I had like no clue what I was doing, and fortunately, there were enough professionals in my sphere who kind of guided me and took me under their wing and showed me how to do it. But again, it just goes back to I had so much fun being at games, describing them, that even though I didn't really know what I was doing, I still really enjoyed doing it and was very, very lucky to get the opportunity to do it. And then, like I said, that led me to Penn State, graduated in 2003, and life began shortly thereafter.
All right. So essentially your passion from broadcasting has been everlasting.
Yeah.
And it's just always been there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I feel bad for my wife. Like my wife sometimes is like, don't you want to like have a hobby or something to be passionate about? I'm like, well, you have to understand that, I direct so much passion into my professional life and my family life too, that, there's not really a whole lot left for anything else other than maybe lighting up the grill on Friday.
Right. That's what I was about to say. You got your hobby.
Yeah. No, it's grilling and it's drinking and it's travel. But that was the thing that kind of tripped me out about what happened in March is, and I don't know if you guys can relate to this too. I described to you how I was on the road 4 or 5 days a week, calling all these games in all these cities, staying in all these hotels, eating in all these restaurants. Yeah, I missed my family, but I was doing it. I was kind of living my dream. And the things that give me the most enjoyment in life, live sports, eating in restaurants, travel, and it's all gone. Right. March 12th, it's all gone.
Off the table.
Off the table. You don't know when it's coming back. I really had a really tough time dealing with that. And I bet you guys could probably relate to that too. And that's where I kind of cringed a little bit when so many people were adamantly against restarting professional sports, restarting collegiate sports.
Or Curb Street.
Yeah, well, and look, I feel a little bit bad for Kirk because I think he was being honest. He was asked a question, he gave an honest answer. He got crushed for it, but I think he spoke what was on his mind and what was in his heart. I don't think Kirk was against college football being played this year. I think he thought it would not happen. Right. There were times where I thought it didn't happen. Same. But I think it's kind of a lazy argument to say, well, these millionaire pro athletes and billionaire owners, they can wait. Well, the billionaire owners and millionaire athletes still support 5-figure salary people like us. Mm-hmm. 4-figure salary people like us who rely on that income that comes from games. But I think too, sports just provide such a necessary distraction. Like, okay, if you don't want sports to start back up because we need to concentrate on dealing with the pandemic, I get it. But then what are we all supposed to do? Just sit in our homes and be miserable with the TV off for 11 months?
And I know all that turmoil that was going on, like all the racial tension and all that stuff. I remember on one of our episodes, I said a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that there was no sports, no anything, no distraction. So people were it was like a boiling over, the pot was boiling over because there was just nothing to distract.
That's a really interesting point. And you're right. I mean, outside of what I guess NASCAR and the PGA in late May, but I think, to that point, that's another kind of strong argument for why we needed to have sports back, because once we got that back, I think it gave athletes a huge platform to really engage with these vital issues that affect all of us. You know, if we did not have sports in August when all that awful stuff was going on with Jacob Blake and then later with Breonna Taylor, you know, we would not have had the platform from which to start discussions, very, very important discussions about all this. So that's another reason why I think you make such a good point. That's another reason why it was really, really important to get sports started back up. And I think the leagues and the athletes deserve a lot of credit for taking that platform and doing something useful with it.
For sure.
So, so on more of a lighter note, though, we want to got a question to ask you personally, though. So in our research, we saw that you worked in both Savannah and New Orleans. What ultimately brought you to Atlanta to work?
Okay, great question. So I always kind of aspired to, my goal in life, and it remains my goal, is to be the team employed radio play-by-play announcer for an NFL, NBA, NHL, or Major League Baseball team. I'm very, very lucky working for Atlanta United right now. And quite honestly, I consider working for a club the size and stature of Atlanta United to be equivalent to working in the NFL, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, because I guarantee you the Jacksonville Jaguars aren't drawing 72,000 a game. So, but you know, that's something I always kind of strive for. I wanted to be the radio play-by-play announcer for a major league sports team. Well, you can only do that in a major league city, right? So, you know, Atlanta was always kind of on my list of places that I wanted to work in because of the weather, the low cost of living. I think the time that I spent out of Penn State in Savannah, where I worked there for 3 years, made me even more familiar with Atlanta. You know, I went to work in New Orleans in the wake of Hurricane Katrina because I almost felt like it was a little bit of a duty to be a part of helping that city get back on its feet. And if I could do that by helping to disseminate information and tell the story of what was happening there, I thought it was worth it. And I had a amazing 2 years working for WWL Radio, telling that story in New Orleans, also being part of the Saints broadcast. But that's not why I went there. I went there to work in their news department. I just thought it was very, very important, almost a moral obligation for me to be a part of disseminating that information. But living in New Orleans in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Katrina was a very, very difficult thing to go through. You know, imagine Atlanta with only 5% of its restaurants open and 10% of its grocery stores open, and you have such a severe crime problem where it's not safe to be out at night. You're 25 years old and you're trying to meet people and plant roots in a new city. It was impossible. It was an untenable situation. So fortunately, an opportunity came up in Atlanta, and it was not a sports-related opportunity, but at the time, my brother was living in Atlanta, working for the Atlanta Falcons, living with my sister-in-law in Lawrenceville, and I thought, well, this is perfect. I have family in Atlanta. I have a lot of close friends in Atlanta. It's a city that I think I'd love to live in for the rest of my life, and I still plan to, and I hope to. So let's do it. And things just kind of fell into place. But it wasn't really an opportunity to work in sports that brought me here. It was, again, an opportunity to work in a newsroom, which was not really my passion, but at least it was a vehicle to get me to this city. And everything kind of came together after I got here.
Can we chart your course real quick? So you went from Philly to...
Yeah. So I went from Philly to Penn State, Penn State to Savannah, Savannah to New Orleans, New Orleans to Atlanta. Been in Atlanta about 15 years.
Nice.
So, you know, being in the industry as long as you have been, about 2 decades, how has it changed? How's the industry changed since you started?
Wow. Well, unfortunately, I think the industry has consolidated to the point where there are fewer people working in it. I think that's very unfortunate. But I think and that's why I'm really glad I'm on Fish and Grits tonight, because the biggest change in the radio industry has been this expansion of podcasting. And now the three of you have the ability to entertain and engage with an audience, and all you need is a microphone and a computer to record everything, and a platform to push it out. I think that's great. I think the one thing that podcasting has done, it's brought so many new voices into our industry, and it's brought so many new ideas and so many new entertainers, that it really has. I know this sounds probably a little overly profound. I mean, we're talking about a sports podcast, but I think it's really elevated the national conversation. I know in talk radio, for example, when I got into talk radio in 1997, the only radio stations that were really engaged in a talk format were all conservative leaning politically. Now you have a choice. If you don't even want to listen to anything political, you can put on the sports radio station, or you can listen to a sports podcast, or an entertainment podcast, or a comedy podcast. I told you guys off the air, I might do a podcast on barbecue this year, or wine, or something like that. And I might get 5 subscribers, and that's fine. I just have thoughts about barbecue that I want to get off my chest. So that's a positive. The consolidation of the industry, which has unfortunately led to the elimination of a lot of jobs and the destruction of a lot of great radio stations across the country. The positive outcome of that is it has created opportunities for people to have their own platforms on their own now. That's been the biggest change. I think as far as play-by-play is concerned, there really hasn't been that much of a change, other than what we're going through right now with being off-site due to the pandemic. I hope that'll change. But I think we're seeing radio stations being run on shorter staffs with smaller budgets, but yet more people want to be engaged in the industry, so they're just going out and doing it on their own, which I think is a good thing.
Before we move on to more sports questions, I have one 92.9 centric question for you.
Okay.
So every day, maybe like what was I don't, my time frame is messed up just because of the whole COVID thing. But I remember every 3:40 and 5:40, I would always used to tune in for your segment, where you would pull together all these facts on the on Dukes and Bell. So can you sort of tell me, like, how does that? When did you stop doing that, first of all, and how did that go? When did they transition to Guy Talk? Was that like a decision to give you some more time to do other things, or how did that sort of happen?
Yeah, I think we all realized mutually that I was so tied up with Hawks games and Atlanta United, and days where I was on the road, I wouldn't be able to participate in those segments at all, because I'd either be at a hotel or at the arena or something like that. Then when we started to count up all the days that I would be out, it just made more sense to not have me do that anymore. And that's totally fine. It was a very difficult segment to execute. It did require a lot of research, a lot of work.
I could tell. I could tell. That's why I loved it so much.
Yeah. And I kind of liked doing it, but it was becoming kind of burdensome. And honestly, I mean, and I think Mike Bell would say this publicly too. There were stories that Mike Bell wanted to cover in that segment that I didn't feel comfortable talking about. Why not? I keep thinking that, when I'm on the radio, that some father who may have his kid in the car is listening to the radio station. and I did not feel comfortable covering some of the content in that segment that they wanted to have covered. And that's totally fine. That's totally their right. I'm absolutely fine with that. It's not like I got fired or anything,
right.
But I did not feel comfortable dealing with some of the subject matter that they wanted to deal with in that segment. That's totally their right. And that's why we transitioned that way. But it was mainly because I was just going to be out so often with Hawks and Atlanta United travel that it was just best that we move on.
That's funny you say that, because I would always realize when he would come to more of the filth, Lauren filth type of stuff, you would always like come up with different words to say so you wouldn't have to say certain words, and you'd be very strategic about the way that you would sort of talk about those things.
Let me tell you a story really quickly. When I was working in Savannah, I was the program director for a sports talk radio station there. And one of our big advertisers on that radio station was a strip club. and look, that's typical of small market radio, and that's totally fine. And they were really good clients, and we were really good partners for them, and we drove them a lot of business, and they gave us a lot of business. That's totally fine. But I remember taking a phone call one day from a man who was extremely polite and extremely non-confrontational, but pointed out that he wanted me to explain why I felt it was appropriate to be, and the ads we were running were risque. I mean, they were really kind of pushing the boundary. and he wanted me to explain why I felt it was appropriate for our radio station to be playing those ads that were being heard by his 10-year-old kid who was taken to school. I couldn't come up with a response to that.
Right.
That was a real wake-up call for me. Like, I can't do that. I cannot engage in that kind of content. And honestly, I don't think the Atlanta Hawks or Atlanta United would want me doing that. My job is to work for 92.9 The Game. That's 1/3 of my job. 1/3 of my job is to work directly for Atlanta United. They pay me directly. I work for Arthur Blank. And 1/3 of my job is, it's a little bit convoluted how it all works out contractually, but basically I represent the Atlanta Hawks and I represent Atlanta United. I represent those brands. If I go on the radio and I start, getting into this double entendre and risque subject matter, it's going to, it's not going to reflect positively on those brands. So it just got to the point where it was too much. It was too risky for me to be engaging in that kind of content, because I don't want to lose my job with the soccer team. I don't want to lose my job with the basketball team. I love doing that stuff. So that's all
Perfect.
it was.
Yeah, perfect. And just this don't take too long of this one, but I just want to know, in terms of when you're in the Savannah market, do you cover Atlanta? What do you cover? Atlanta sports? Do you cover Georgia sports? Like, what kind of stuff? Since I know there's not necessarily a lot of teams there.
Great question. Not a lot of Atlanta. Like on our station, we had University. So this is weird. We were in Savannah, but we had University of South Carolina and Clemson football, because Savannah's right on the state line, and we had powerful signals that went into South Carolina. So really what I covered the most down there was the Jacksonville Jaguars and golf. A lot of golf. The MCI, or whatever it's called now, Verizon Heritage, whatever it is. That was a big golf tournament on Hilton Head. Savannah had a big senior tour event. And of course, the Masters was right up the road. So a lot of high school sports, a lot of collegiate sports, but mainly the Jaguars and golf is what we do.
That's very interesting. I'm going to circle back real quick on you. You had mentioned that you want to do a podcast about barbecue or wine. And I know it takes a lot of work to get a podcast started. You have a little bit bigger of an audience than we did when we started. But if you ever want to come on and talk strictly barbecue and wine or whatever, we will make a segment for you, Mike Conti.
Let's do it. Yeah. You got my email address, so let's do it. I mean, you pretty much know my schedule. If the Hawks or Atlanta United, if they aren't playing, it's very easy for me to carve out a couple minutes at night. So I'd be happy to do that with you guys anytime.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, we're all big foodies, so we food is often a topic here, alcohol included.
Absolutely.
If you don't, you may or may not have caught this when it happened, but when Andy and Randy had food delivered to them at the stadium, at their homes at the time, and it was fish and grits. That was us.
Oh, okay, great. No, that's awesome. That's really kind of you guys. I'll tell you what. I can't I can't overstate how much those gestures of kindness from listeners mean to us. A lot of times it feels like we're just talking into a microphone and we don't necessarily get to connect with people on the other side of it. So that was a really nice gesture. They told me how good it was too.
Yeah, it's actually Micah's. Well, where are you at? Micah's friend, who's a chef.
Yeah, we got to get you some of that.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, what was the fish with the grits? Was it catfish?
No, I forgot which fish he said it was.
Okay,
but I mean, the way he makes it, you get the full flavor in every bite.
I think it was tilapia, wasn't it?
I think it was tilapia.
It might have been.
Tilapia is like a good neutral fish where you can flavor it however you want, basically, and go to town with it.
But with grits, like especially with a lot of people's grits, I've noticed like there might be like around the edges, you might not get all the flavor, or it's more seasoned in the middle where the fish is. No, with that, every bite you got every flavor that he put in it, and it was,
That's good. Now that means it was well seasoned, well marinated. I want to try this now. You got me hungry.
I mean, he's a successful chef. He's been on Food Network. He's won a show on there. So is
he at a restaurant or is he just a private chef?
He was he was doing for the Hawks games. He was one of the caterers at the Hawks games, but since they're not really doing the crowds, he's just doing his own thing. So
he's created a brand, the Flu University, because his last name is Fred Fluellen, but he goes by Flu. So
Flu University.
Yeah.
I will check that out.
I'll shoot you a lot of his info and stuff after the
Please
show.
Do. Yeah.
But let's kind of take a gander at the Falcons. Their season just ended. There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of fans. A lot of websites are engaged in this. It's all over Twitter. I'm sure you see all of us battling all over Twitter on who we should take, what we should do. It's quite the divided fan base on the way it's being viewed from the outside. And you being someone who is in this industry, maybe you have a little bit more, insight from people that things like that. Maybe you don't, but let's find out. Mike Conti, what do you say?
I don't have insight because they have no coach or general manager right now with whom I could have a relationship.
That's true. That is,
and I don't know Rich McKay that well. Let me tell you what I would do if I were the GM, and I am not, and I never will be. You have the 4th overall pick. The Falcons have never in their history had the 4th overall pick. Okay. And they haven't had a pick this high since 2008 when they took Matt Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time. When you're picking this high, you have a very rare opportunity to go do something that could decisively change the direction of your franchise, because it is not the goal to have a top 4 pick every year.
Nope.
So if this is a once in a decade, or a once in the case of the Falcons, once in a 13-year opportunity, you have got to do what it takes to get into the top 2 and take Justin Fields. And that's going to create a whole new set of awkwardness, because Matt's probably not going to want that. And Matt's going to see the writing on the wall, but Matt's still probably going to be an Atlanta Falcon in 2021. But guys, I don't know about you. I just like the last 3 years of Falcons football has not been very exciting to me.
Yeah.
And pre-pandemic, I think the empty seats at the stadium kind of spoke for themselves a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with Mike Bell much, but I do absolutely agree with him when he says that the Falcons are not going to win a Super Bowl with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. I totally agree with that. So you're so close right now to being in the top 2. Take that final step. It's going to cost you a lot. It's going to cost you probably a first, third, fourth, and fifth. I mean, it's a lot to give up, or a first and a first next year. I mean, you're rolling the dice. And I'm not discounting the fact that this team has needs elsewhere that need to be addressed this offseason. But guys, we've got to get this fan base excited. And I think the player that's going to do that, because you won't get Lawrence. Jacksonville's going to take him. I think Lawrence is the best, surefire quarterback prospect in this draft. But you have a chance to bring in a local guy who I think could really, really energize and excite this fan base, and also not have the pressure of having to come in and be the starter from Jump Street. To me, that's what you have to do. You're this close. It's a lot easier going from 4 to 2 than to go from 15 to 2.
Yeah.
And I think we've done such a good job at adding layers of talent, meaning like generations of talent at other positions where you don't have that drop off. But now fans, watching Matt Ryan obviously drop off in front of our eyes and his abilities and what he's able to do with this team. I think, a lot of us are expecting, okay, it's that time. We have to have that insurance there. Matt may bounce back next year, but I mean, the last 2 seasons have been his lowest QBR of his entire career.
No.
And I think the writing's on the wall.
He's a declining player, and he's the best quarterback the Falcons. He might be the best overall player the Atlanta Falcons have ever had. And it's criminal that he did not win a Super Bowl, because what happened in Houston 3 years ago was not his fault. It's not his fault. Okay. It was Kyle Shanahan's fault. It may have been partially Devontae Freeman's fault.
DQ.
Jake Matthews.
Yeah. Yes. All of that. It was not Matt Ryan's fault. And I'm sad for him that he did not get that ring, because he deserved it. And he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I probably first ballot. I mean, his accomplishments speak for itself. But I don't think it's a one or the other situation where, if you want Justin Fields, that means you don't appreciate Matt Ryan. I don't think that at all. I absolutely appreciate Matt Ryan, but I also acknowledge that his window is closing. He is a declining player. It's unassailable that he is a declining player. But here's a really unique opportunity where he can have the long goodbye in 2021 in a low pressure season. Fans are going to be excited because you have Fields ready to go in 2022. They can learn from each other, hopefully, or at least Fields can learn from Matt Ryan. Right. It buys your new head coach a year. It basically buys everyone a year. You go into 2021 in a nothing to lose situation, but I think your fans are still excited because you've got Fields. Honestly, you could go into 2021, you could have another 4-12 season, and I think fans would say, good. We have a top 5 draft pick to add a guy now with Justin Fields. So that's just the way I look at it. I know that's really kind of anti the way I feel about Atlanta sports mostly, because I want to win everything all the time. But I think we need to be a little bit realistic about where the Falcons are right now. I think Arthur Blank was too. And he said, look, we're not a 4-12 team, but we probably weren't better than 7-9. Right. And when you're at that stage, you need a hard, clean sweep of everything. And unfortunately, in the NFL, it starts at the quarterback position.
So a couple things to unpack from that. So say the first thing, say we do get Justin Fields. Are you looking to try to trade Matt Ryan next season, or are you just going to let him ride out his contract? And because what does he have, 2 more years or 1 more year?
Well,
3 more years.
He has 3, but basically 1 more before he becomes tradable from a salary standpoint. You could pick up the phone and call 31 GMs and say, hey, look, if you want, here you go. But I don't think anyone's going to take that money on. And you can't cut him. This year, you're talking about too much of a dead cap situation. So Matt Ryan's going to be on the Falcons in 2021, I think. I just don't think you're going to be able to part ways with him. It's just the reality of where you are financially. You could try to trade him. I don't think they'll be able to. So that's why I think you're a little bit stuck. Like, Matt Ryan's going to be on the Atlanta Falcons in 2021, even if you don't want him to be.
I think the only way that you can possibly move Matt off of the Falcons is if you sell him on, look, you're in the twilight of your career, go to a winning team that needs you, like the 49ers, and restructure your contract.
That would be the only way.
That's the only way it can happen.
Yeah, and I don't know if he'd want to do that, to be honest with you. But you're spot on. That's the only way. Otherwise, you wait until the end of next season, you do a post June 1st and you part ways, and it's a clean parting. And then, yeah, I mean, he would be a free agent. He could pick wherever he would want to go.
I love to sound like another Pennsylvania kid like Joe Montana trying to get a chip in San Francisco.
Well, that's true. Well, Joe Montana and Matt Ryan were from very different parts of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It's like saying Atlanta's right down the street from Valdosta. Not really.
So I think
wait. Well, just one more thing on that other one. So if we're not able to trade to that 2 spot, or if Justin Fields doesn't miraculously fall, then what do we do? Do we reach for a quarterback, or do we draft position? And
yeah, I think, boy, then that gets, you're almost looking at a trade down situation there, wouldn't you? Where if you had a quarterback identified that wasn't Fields, like let's just say it was Kyle Trask, you wouldn't need to take in the top 10. Then I think you're looking at a trade down situation. Maybe you got a 2nd or a 3rd round pick that you can add to this, because the Falcons do need guys. They need guys right now. So in a way, I think it's a win-win situation. If the Falcons aren't able to trade up, they're still going to be able to take care of needs and can probably still get a really good quarterback. What I would hate to see them do is be sitting there at 4 and taking the 3rd best quarterback on the board. I would not like to see that. I would not like to get into a Blake Bortles situation where you're in the top 5. You feel like, okay, we're this high, we've got to take a quarterback, but the top 2 guys we wanted were off the board.
Well, according to Pro Football Focus, they said the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson. Yeah. So Fields will be there.
I would die of a heart attack in shock if that happened. I would die of a heart attack in shock. If that happened, the Atlanta Falcons, all the bad luck we've had in this city in sports over the last 50-some years, that all goes away on draft night if that happens. That would be a gift. Look, I know some scouts are really, really high on Wilson, and Wilson might end up being a great pick for the Falcons, but that would be an absolute gift.
Yeah.
I agree. So before we get to the draft, we obviously have to settle on a head coach and a GM. And I want to dial it back about an episode or 2 for us. I had made a statement that I felt like GMs were only money managers in the NFL, and I feel that as I had time to think about that, I was like, I was tricked into thinking that because of what Thomas Dimitroff was for us. And not to say he wasn't great with money and he wasn't all of those things, but I started to look at the successful franchises around the nation, and I was like, they have GMs that came in and said, this is what I'm going to do with this team. I'm going to build this type of scheme. I'm going to build this winning culture here, and I'm going to get a head coach that's really good at coaching football. And no matter what scheme we have, and I kept thinking of the Baltimore Ravens because they've had, I blanked on his name right now, Harbaugh, up there for quite some time. And if you think about the offensive schemes that he's ran across his career as he's been there, they're quite different. But, the decision came from the top to move in a different direction.
Right.
And Harbaugh said, okay, I'll do that.
Right.
I'll execute it. So I've realized that, the Falcons had a money manager in the front office, and I feel like the important move now is to find a GM that sets the tone for this franchise. But that's just my opinion, and I want to know what your opinion is. What's more important to get right, the head coach or the GM?
100 times the GM. 100 times, I think. And Baltimore is a really good example. You've done a really good job pinpointing an example where I don't think John Harbaugh was like, yeah, I'm going to throw out my book of everything I've done in my whole life offensively because we're going to have Lamar Jackson now. That certainly worked the other way around. I honestly feel one of the problems that developed in the Quinn Dimitroff era was that perhaps Quinn had too large of a say in player personnel. And the Falcons may have actually gotten caught into a little bit of a rut because they tried too hard to find players to fit a specific scheme, especially on defense. So what I would really like to see the Atlanta Falcons do is find a general manager who's going to put his or her, and it could be a woman, his or her imprint on this franchise with and I'm going to take an Atlanta United term. We're going to have a profile of what we want to be as a football team. I'm going to find the guys who fit that profile. You're going to coach them. But I am making the profile, and I'm going to find the guys. That, to me, is how this needs to go. And that general manager needs to have autonomy. He or she needs to be able to report directly to Arthur Blank. And I think the head coach needs to report to the general manager. So the GM hire, in my opinion, is going to be Arthur Blank's biggest decision that he has ever made in his 20 plus years owning a professional sports team, whether it be the Falcons, Atlanta United, whatever. Because if he gets this one wrong, an already bad situation for the Falcons becomes worse. And now you've dug yourself a hole that it's going to take years to climb out of. If you get it right, you've positioned yourself to be competitive year after year after year, because you now know the profile of what you're trying to do, and you're going to make other teams, and in particular teams in the NFC South, adjust to what you're doing and not the other way around. I'm tired of NFC South teams trying to build rosters and draft so they know that they can shut down the New Orleans Saints. I'm tired of that. Let's build something here in Atlanta where now New Orleans has to draft to stop the Falcons.
Right.
I would really like to see that once in my life.
That's so true. I never really correlated, but that's pretty much all the moves we've made in the past 15 years have all been about trying to keep up with Drew Brees' arm.
Right. Right. And Carolina and Tampa Bay. I mean, if you think of all the moves they've made, and look, the NFC South for a long time has been a really good quarterback division with Ryan and, Cam, for what it's worth, had a couple really good years, and Jameis, for what it's worth, had a couple really good years. But that's just always cracked me up, how you have three teams in this division who year after year are making moves and drafting because they're trying to figure out a way to stop Drew Brees. I'm over it.
I mean, it's just because they've been so good for so long, and
they have.
I agree.
They have.
They had 3 7-9 seasons. They were in a similar situation that we were for a little.
Well, I remember in talking to my old friends in New Orleans at WWL during their 2015 season. I remember Hokie Gajan, who the late great Hokie Gajan, who was the color analyst on Saints broadcast. He told me there is no way Peyton and Brees are here beyond this year. And that was 2015. Wow. I bet they're glad they kept him.
For sure.
Do you have a favorite, or do you have an idea who you think is the leading candidate for the Falcons to hire as a GM? Do you just like anybody?
No, I have no idea. I will say this. I talked to a couple people today who know the two candidates that were spoken to today, the Rams collegiate scouting director and the Colts director of college scouting. It sounds like the Falcons talked to two really, really good up-and-coming candidates today. If that's the profile of who they're talking to, I think they're going to be in good shape. I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. Some of the people have been interviewed, like Anthony Robinson, who's an in-house candidate, was interviewed. I really don't know much about him. So I don't want to give an opinion on who it should be without knowing everything about all the candidates. Does that make sense? I have faith they'll make a good hire. I have a ton of faith that they'll make a good hire, but I don't know which candidate would be superior to any of the others that they've spoken to at this point.
That and what you brought up though poses a great question in my mind. Just like Like, who is it? So is it, I guess it's the GM who sort of decides the identity of the team, because I know the Falcons have sort of been this like rudderless ship for a while, where it's like we don't have a true identity. It's like, yeah, our offense is really good, but then our offense is just really, throwing a lot of yards and not scoring. So that's not an identity. We can't run. We don't pressure with our defense. It's like, so I guess it's going to be huge going forward to find an identity for this team.
Yeah, and it probably is going to need to start on the defensive side of the football. But again, let's go back to Fields. If you're building your team around Justin Fields, everything changes on both sides of the ball. Yeah. Then you really start looking at, okay, let's start in the trenches. I mean, if we have Fields, who is going to be a little bit more mobile, certainly more mobile than Matt Ryan, but play out of the pocket more than Matt Ryan, that changes everything you're doing at the tackle spot. That changes everything you're doing at tight end. You're probably looking for different kinds of receivers. Your running game is totally different at that point. Mm-hmm. I honestly think, guys, that, if I'm the new GM and I'm evaluating this roster and salary cap and contracts and length of contracts and everything like that, I'm saying, okay, Calvin Ridley, you're good. Grady Jarrett, yep, you're staying. Everyone else, you've got to fight for your job. Right. I'm serious. Like I'm taking Calvin Ridley and Grady Jarrett, and I'm building around those two, and let's see what happens. Because I think anyone else on this roster is expendable. For sure. I hate to say it. Well, let me take that back. That's harsh, because Lindstrom has looked very, very good. That's probably Lindstrom should probably be in that group as well.
How dare you besmirch the name of Foye Oluokun on this?
and look, Foye is a nice player, and he's a great story, and he's a really good guy. But I mean, guys, I mean, he's not. I thought the whole Pro Bowl thing this year was a little silly, to be totally honest with you. Like just to openly kind of campaign for a Pro Bowl spot is.
On a 4 and 12 team.
I don't like seeing that. Your resume, your playing resume should speak for itself. Foye is a nice player, but you can find other Foye Oluokans out there. I really do feel that way.
Maybe I'll have to reevaluate my opinion of him.
He's a nice player. I didn't say he's not a nice player, but he's not a franchise player.
I agree. Campaigning for a Pro Bowl spot on a 4 and 12 team is a little bit cringeworthy.
Campaigning for a Pro Bowl spot at all is cringeworthy. It's your playing resume should speak for itself. You should not have to encourage people to vote someone into the Pro Bowl. It should just speak for itself.
I hear you.
So, I'm glad at least he got a Player of the Week thing to. Sure. Or whatever that was.
Actually, was it Player of the Week or Player of the Month? It might have been Player of the Week. Maybe it was both. Yeah. I know Youngway was Special Teams Player of the Month, I think. Yeah. So, hey.
So we they've talked a lot about how the cap is planning on going down to about 175 million. 175 million per year. So for per team, I mean, what moves do you expect us to make to get not only get under the cap, but to create enough cap space to fill those big holes in our roster?
Well, first of all, I'm not 1,000% sure the cap is going to go down to 175, and I know that's been reported. I did think Rich McKay said something interesting. Might have even been yesterday during that press conference he had with Arthur, where the league's going to be adding the 17th game. They're probably going to expand the playoffs. There might be a new broadcast package that's created as a result of that. And if that's the case and they get it done this offseason, cap doesn't go down. So the Falcons are in bad cap shape, but it may not be quite as dire as it looks right now. I'll tell you two things they could do that would make it worse from a cap standpoint, and that's cutting Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. That's where I think, again, that is a non-starter this year, because when you're in the situation you're in right now, you can't afford to have that much dead cap money.
Yeah.
Beyond that, again, I mean, I think we're talking about just a lot of guys that you're going to have to evaluate. And I'll go back to what I said a moment ago. You know, Calvin Ridley and Grady Jarrett, you're still on the team. Everyone else, Chris Lidstrom, you're still on the team. Everyone else, we're looking at contracts. Maybe we're looking at a couple restructures, but we're probably going to be moving on from a lot of people. And that's where, again, if you're in a position where perhaps you were to trade down in the draft and you could load up with a few more rookie contracts than you would normally have, that's one way to ease your cap burden pretty quickly, because that low number is locked in.
Yeah, I was, we were talking about it earlier today, I believe, how Grady's only locked up for 2 more years.
Right.
And, if you extend, and his cap number goes up to over 20 million next year. So if you extend him a couple more years, that helps out tremendously with your cap. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Grady is going to be willing to be very flexible with this team. I think he really likes it here. I think he sees the potential for himself to be a Hall of Famer here. And I think he would probably realize that if the Falcons did some things aggressively in this year's draft, that he'll be here long enough where he can win a championship here. Grady really strikes me as a good guy. Keanu Neal too. I mean, that's the thing that's hard about having these conversations, because a lot of the guys we're talking about potentially moving on from, like Ricardo Allen's a great guy. Keanu Neal is a great guy. I've gotten to know some of these people personally, either by covering the team or doing the coaches show and doing long form interviews with them. I did a town hall thing with Grady Jarrett a couple years ago. I mean, these are really, really good guys. And I think sometimes we think of them just as players and just as contracts. And it's not that simple. Like it hurts to be talking about moving on from a Keanu Neal because of how hard he's worked and what a good guy he is in that locker room. But unfortunately, these are the tough decisions that a new GM is going to have to make if he's trying to make this team better.
We actually had the opportunity to get a deeper view into the athlete's life not too long ago, and about what it's like to be a player behind, at the receiving end of all that scrutiny from the fans, and just to be treated exactly like a pawn on the board. And we spoke to Jaden Lars Woodby. He was the former safety at Florida State and just transferred to Boston College this year. So it was very eye-opening. And yeah, a lot of fans just don't see it that way.
No, it's sad too. But it's understandable, especially in football. I think football more than any other sport, because you're wearing the helmet, so you don't see these guys' faces too much. I know that sounds kind of corny, but I really think that tends to dehumanize football players when you don't see their face.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of a sport where they don't wear helmets, we get into a little bit of some basketball talk.
Okay.
So the Hawks, man, had a super exciting offseason at the last second. They're like signing everybody that was on the board pretty much. So I want to ask you, while that was going on, what were sort of your like initial thoughts of them getting all that talent? Was there any party that thought this might be like overkill, or just give us some insight into what you were thinking when that was happening?
I kept thinking, boy, the days of Antonius Cleveland and Damian Lee and Dennis Schroeder being the best player on the team are gone. Thank God that's done. No, I was really pumped. I know, because I probably spend more time around the Hawks than any of the other teams in this town, just because of the amount of travel that I do with them. I know that Tony Ressler was getting very, very eager to start winning. And I think Travis Schlenk and Tony Ressler both felt that they could have potentially been a playoff team last year.
Same here. Without the John Collins suspension, I think we were right.
That killed the year, quite frankly. I mean, it just killed the year. because by the time John came back, then Trey was battling through some injuries. On top of everything else, he had a Kevin Huerter injury when Collins was out. They went on that long losing streak in November. Season was over before it began, which is unfortunate because the way that season started last year, I think you saw some signs that, yeah, the Hawks are going to be a good young team. They're not going to be very deep, but they're going to be a good young team. And by the way, I think it's notable that if you look at, I mean, the Hawks are 4-3 right now. They've absolutely blown 2 games. They should be 6-1. They have absolutely blown 2 games. Okay. If you look at these 7 games where I think objectively you can say the Hawks have been, I mean, they haven't been blown out by anyone, even in the 3 games they've lost. It's interesting that your 4 best players are still your guys. They aren't free agents. They're guys you drafted. Trey, Reddish, Hunter, and Collins. These are your guys. So I think that's really important just to remember when you talk about the confidence that you can potentially have in Travis Schlenk. This is the group that Travis has assembled. Now, I thought he did a masterful job of adding to it, but what we're seeing now is that maybe some more risks were taken in the specific players that he added than we perceived, because Gallinari's durability has looked iffy so far. Capella's durability has looked a little iffy, although I'm really glad to see. I think Capella has picked things up really, really quickly.
15 boards a night.
Yeah, no, I mean, number 3 rebounder in the league. So, I mean, that came together a lot faster than I expected. That's a really good sign. But I have a durability concern about Gallinari. I have a major durability concern about Rondo. And last night was weird how they cleared him to play, but then he didn't play, and now he's going to be out for a week or 2. Rondo's not a young guy. Bogdanovich, I think there's a little bit of a durability concern there, although it sounds like his ankle injury is not as serious as we thought. So, yeah, I mean, and then Chris Dunn, you signed him knowing that he had some damage from Chicago. You drafted Okongwu knowing that he had a foot problem. So I think we may have overlooked some of these durability concerns when these contracts were signed because we just wanted to get really, really excited. And now we're seeing the effects of these durability problems because the second unit is not really, or at least in the last 2 games, the second unit has not helped this team. Right. And you're not going to be a playoff team if you don't have a robust second unit. Solomon Hill is a great guy to have in the locker room, and he's a good defender, but he's not going to be able to give you instant offense off the bench, right? Nope. Brandon Goodwin, great story, but he's not going to be instant offense off the bench, right? And honestly, I think from a defensive standpoint, you've seen situations this year where when Rondo comes off the floor, the Hawks get into a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
So you got to get these guys back. I think if you can get them back and get them playing a substantial amount of time, the Hawks are going to be fine. They'll be a playoff team. But I just worry in a non-bubble season in the midst of a pandemic. Yeah, Travis did a great job of building a deep team, but I'm worried because if you're going to have 3 or 4 guys out every night, maybe you're not as deep as we thought.
Not as deep as we thought, yeah. It's while we're sort of here, what do you think is? I know, so like you mentioned, the bench is a lot of reason. The poorest bench is for these blowing these leads. But what do you think that is like when the starters come back in and they still have a slight lead, but then they can't sort of maintain that? What do you think that is?
Well, I think in the case of the Cleveland loss, the starter sat too long and got too cold. I don't blame Lloyd for that, by the way. I think that was just a weird back-to-back situation. It's your first back-to-back you've had in 10 months. So I'm not blaming the coach, but I think the first unit just got too cold. I don't know. I think one of the things I've noticed is that you have some streaky shooters on this team. The Hawks have done a pretty good job of getting open looks consistently from 3. They have not consistently made those. They have not converted those open looks consistently. like Bogdanovich, for example.
That was in my head. I was thinking it
seems to be really, really streaky, right? Like either he's red hot or ice cold. And Lloyd Pierce even mentioned last night that he had a meeting with Bogdanovich, and they kind of came to the agreement that Bogdanovich really hasn't gotten fully going yet. Herter, I think, has been very streaky. I mean, he had a miserable preseason shooting wise, but he was able to flip the switch pretty quickly when the regular season started. So I like the fact that the Hawks are getting into good spots and they're generating these open looks. But because they're not such a strong team defensively, they're going to be very, very reliant. They're going to have to shoot 35% from three at a minimum to win basketball games. And that might be a tough ask. I think when you ask me what the drop-off has been when the first unit comes back in, I just think they're missing open shots. And hopefully they will kind of get back into it's not regress to the mean. I guess they would progress to the mean. And that some of those open looks would start falling.
Yeah, I mean,
so you talked about Lloyd Pierce a little bit. So what are your thoughts on his progression since being hired on as head coach?
Well, Lloyd's pedigree, his reputation was that he's a great player developer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you look at Hunter and Reddish, maybe to a lesser extent Herter, but Hunter and Reddish for sure. And I know the amount of one-on-one work that Lloyd has done with Reddish in particular. There's your evidence. Like, the guy is an incredible player developer. I think Reddish has the potential maybe to be the best all-around player on this team. I think we've seen signs of it. Hunter has taken an amazing leap from year one to year two. I think Lloyd deserves a lot of credit for that. I think he is still finding ways to navigate in-game situations. And for someone who's never been a head coach before, and for someone who until this year didn't have a former head coach on his bench, that can be really, really difficult. And that's an area where I hope Nate McMillan will really help him. But I would say that Lloyd, so far, for what the Hawks expected of him and what they've needed from him, he has met those expectations because he's made his players better.
Okay. So in the event that the team doesn't live up to the expectations, do you see Pierce potentially being replaced during or after the season?
Yes.
Good simple.
Well, I mean, but what's expectations though?
Right.
What's expectations? Is it playoffs?
Playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I yes. He would have to. I think he has to make the playoffs this year.
Well, I mean, if they keep, I guess if they keep kind of blowing games the way they
no, because you're going to have nights like that in the NBA. The Hawks are still 4-3, by the way. They're still fourth in the East.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they've blown a couple games. That's going to happen. You're also going to steal a couple games too.
Yeah.
So that will work itself out. If the Hawks start getting just waxed, if they just start getting run off the floor on a consistent basis, then we might be having a different conversation. But guys, I mean, the Hawks, up until last night, they were the only team in the league that hadn't trailed by 10 points in any game this year.
Yeah.
Their largest margin of defeat is what, 6 points?
Yep.
So they've competed in every game. I'm not sounding alarm bells yet. And blowing leads, yeah, it sucks. And especially in Atlanta, a city where we just find ways to blow leads like it's going out of style.
Yeah.
It really, really is tough to see because, look, a lot of eyeballs are on the Hawks right now. We have a lot of expectations for them. But no, this group's competing. And honestly, I'd even say they're a little bit ahead of schedule for where I thought they would be right now, just because they had so many new players that they had to integrate. 9 new contributors on this team. And also, arguably, your 3 best defensive players have not played a single minute yet.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we need to be a little more patient. But 72 game season is more than enough of a sample size. And if you don't make the playoffs after 72 games, then yeah, that's probably going to be tough.
So if we say we miss the playoffs, who do you see as potential, and they decide to replace Pierce? Who do you see as the potential replacement?
Yeah, I think then it depends on who's available.
No Nate, no Nate just stepping up. Would you not like seeing Nate?
I think he would be considered.
Yeah.
But I don't really, guys. I don't really feel like Nate McMillan was brought in here as any kind of succession plan or anything like that. I think he was brought in to help and to be a voice in that locker room that they really haven't had as a former head coach in this league. I don't think he was brought in to replace Lloyd Pierce. If something happened at the end of the season, I think then you evaluate and you say, okay, who's going to be available? Is James Borrego, who I really like as a head coach a great deal, and unfortunately, he just hasn't had a lot of good teams to coach in Charlotte. Would he be available? Would a Steve Clifford be available? Do you want to try to bring Terry Stotts, who's a former Hawk, in? Like, you just got to see, okay, who can you get? And then you go find the best guy. And I would imagine if it got to that point, and by the way, I think the Hawks are going to make the playoffs. I think Lloyd will still be here. This is not a prediction at
Positivity.
all. Yeah, but if it got to that point, I think Tony Ressler would be very aggressive because, he's trying to prove to this fan base that he's very, very serious about winning and building something where players are going to, free agents are going to want to come and play here. And having the right coach is a big, big part of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing, because as many players love coming to Atlanta, none of them actually want to play here. And that it's the surprising thing.
Yeah, I think that will change quickly. Because even when the Hawks were winning in the highlight factory era, it still probably was a little bit difficult to go to a free. I mean, heck, I remember in 2013 when they got their meeting with Dwight Howard, and their pitch to Dwight was, hey, you can come to Atlanta and play with Al Horford. Now I think it's a little bit different because you do have a bona fide superstar in Trae Young.
The first one since like Neek, pretty much.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, look, I think Paul Millsap doesn't get enough credit. I think Al and Joe probably didn't get enough credit. But, I mean, we're talking about a bona fide, consistent all-star starter every year. You've got it now in Trae Young.
Right.
So the sales pitch has become different. And, this narrative has been peddled out there that there are guys who don't want to play with Trae Young. I have no idea where that crap's coming from because, A, look at all the guys who did want to play with Trae Young that they were able to sign this offseason. And B, look at Trae as a facilitator.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Trae probably puts more value on leading the league in assists than he does leading the league in scoring.
Yeah.
So the sales pitch is changing, guys. And, look, the practice facility, the arena, that's part of it too. You've got first class all the way there. I think that final step now, and this is something that Al alluded to a little bit when he went to Boston, that final step now is getting the fan base engaged to a point where you're going to be playing in an atmosphere every night that has a vibe. And that's something that I think will come as soon as we can get fans back in the building. But that's that final piece. Once you get a really engaged, large, passionate fan base, the Atlanta sales pitch becomes very, very easy.
Tell me if you, I was sort of thinking this about Trae. Tell me if you agree. But I'd say Trae is the first player we've had since Neek that if he went somewhere else, he would still be a star. Like he would still be the number one guy on that team. Yes. Whereas I think a lot of the other guys, when that wasn't the case, like Joe Johnson and Al Horford or Paul Millsap.
That is a great comment. And we saw it with Millsap when he went to Denver. He was nice there. He was okay.
Right. Average.
Al going to Boston is nice. It's okay.
Yeah.
Damari Carroll went to Toronto and damn near washed out of the league.
Pretty much.
Honestly, it's funny. If you think of that 60-win team and who ended up having the most success and was most impactful after they left that team,
Kyle Korver.
Might have been Kyle Korver, right?
Yeah. That's true.
It's crazy to think about, but it's true. And he was, I mean, no one really thought of him as a superstar. They thought him as a, you know, a solid 3-point shooter, a specialist. And yeah, he went to an all-star game, but I think that's spot on. You know, if Trey were playing on the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Orlando Magic or the Charlotte Hornets, he would still be an all-star starter.
Yep.
So transitioning here a bit, because you had mentioned an atmosphere and like a vibe and just a feeling that most Atlanta sports teams don't have. But let's transition to a sport that you probably I've heard expressed more excitement and more passion about in your calls, and that's the Atlanta Five Stripes.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to do the play-by-plays in a stadium? You know, granted, you're the radio guy, but you're still there, correct? You're in building?
Yeah.
What's it feel like to be in that atmosphere of 72,000 fans just...
What's, you guys bourbon drinkers? Scotch drinkers? Or what's the best bourbon you've ever had?
Oh, man, I need more experience. I'd embarrass myself now.
That's okay. Okay. Think of the best bourbon you've ever had, and you are nonstop savoring every moment of that bourbon for 90 minutes. And the entire sensual experience is complete. Like you're just euphoric. That to me is the way I feel calling an Atlanta United match. And the thing that I love the most, guys, and the thing that I think makes the storytelling so much fun is that in soccer, the action never stops. Doesn't stop because you have a free throw. It doesn't stop because you have a pitching change. It doesn't stop because you have to measure for a first down. It's 90 minutes of nonstop. And the fan engagement is on a completely different level than anything else I think you see in professional sports in this town. It's a testament to the fan base, because we've been to a lot of other MLS cities that just does not have that engagement, and you go to their stadiums and there's no vibe and it's boring. Man, I'll tell you what, though, like when you go, whether it be Atlanta or Portland, LAFC, Orlando, which I know some Atlanta United fans will hate me for saying, but Orlando has a really, you know, engaged fan base. There's just nothing like that. It's, I know this sounds corny, but it's like you feel the same emotion as everyone else in that stadium, and the highs and lows and everything in between. And I think, you know, the behavior of the players obviously feeds a lot into that, but I think it's more so just the ebb and flow of the action, which never ever stops. So I'm so grateful for that opportunity. I love doing it. I will say, not having the fans in the stadium post-March is just, it's been dreadful. It's been absolutely awful. I think it's a big reason why Atlanta United had such a lousy year, to be honest with you, because Atlanta United probably feeds more off the energy of its home fans than any other team in the league. And you could clearly see that was missing this year. So I hope that changes soon, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do it, more so than anything else. I'm just so grateful for the energy that the fans bring to the stadium night after night, because they're such a big part of it.
Like
I want to ask about just real quick. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say is I went to a fairly good, you know, high school that had a good soccer team, and like I kind of got into it there, but outside of that, I wasn't really a big soccer fan. But then I went to my first United match, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is different." And that
Ryan, and I think what makes Atlanta work is that our fans aren't trying to mimic a match in England or a match in Spain or a match in France or a match in Mexico. We're trying to be Atlanta, and you know that's. I think it speaks to the multicultural aspect of what you have in that stadium. You know, you have a strong group of Latin supporters. You have a strong group of African-American supporters, of Asian supporters, of guys who look like me. So it's a very uniquely Atlanta experience. It's not taking the chance from some team in the Premier League and slapping a couple new words on it and pretending to be like we're in England. And I think that's what makes it really, really unique. It's probably the professional sporting experience that most reflects the city of the four major sports teams that we have in town.
It's a beautiful thing. Go ahead, Marco. I'm sorry to cut you off earlier.
I was just when you brought up the point about the energy of the crowds, it just made me think, do you think like even whether it's NBA or NFL, that a lot of we've seen a lot of these games that have been like not close. Do you think that not having the fans there has a lot to do with like teams not being able to muster up that energy to come back?
1,000%, Marco. 1,000%. I've had players tell me that, and I've had former players tell me how much it's a handicap to play in an arena that's half full or empty. So, well, I've never played the game. I can only speak to what I feel, but I mean, those are guys who either play the game or have played the game, and they say it. Fans have a much larger role in determining outcomes of games and matches than they realize. And it's really, I'm very grateful that I was able to continue working through the pandemic, and I'm still working today. A lot of people have not been able to. I'm incredibly grateful that I still get to attend live sporting events when pretty much no one else does. So I don't want to sound ungrateful, but like walking into the arena last night before the Hawks-Knicks game, I just kept thinking, man, this sucks. No, I'm serious. Like this sucks that we don't have fans here. The fans, it's almost like there's no point to playing if we can't have fans in the building that we're entertaining. And it's a two-way street too. For the players, it's very, very difficult to be playing when they don't get that emotional lift, that energy lift from the fans. I really hope we can get to the point soon where we can get fans back into this, because it is not the same. I know if you're watching on TV, maybe they're piping in crowd noise or they're doing some special effects to try to make it look somewhat normal. And I think the NBA probably more than any other league has looked the most normal in the way they're presenting the games. It's still not the same. Mm-hmm. And it's so awful not having the fans in there right now.
I could, especially in that Cleveland game, like there's a lot in the Knicks one. I could just, there's so many points because Trey is such a energy guy. You know what I mean? There's points where it's like I could see him needing that extra little boost.
Well, and I think also, yeah, and you're right. But I also think I'm really sad that our fans are not able to see what I'm seeing in person. When it comes to the Hawks, because honestly, the Hawks are playing at a level that I haven't seen them play at in 5 years.
Right.
And it might be hard to perceive some of that on a TV broadcast. That I think stands out to me too. Like, God, there was this actually happened up in Brooklyn, but the point remains when Collins dunked on Jared Allen. I'm thinking, man, if anyone were in the building, the reaction that would have gotten would have been incredible. And instead it's in an empty gym with 30 people. I just, that's such a bummer to me. So that really stands out to me, that I feel like our fans are missing out. Hawks fans are missing out because we're getting to see something in person, a quality of basketball that we haven't had in quite a while.
Yeah. That actually, real quick, it makes me realize kind of what I've been doing with Instagram here lately with basketball content is, instead of hearing that roar from the crowds, I've been going to those content creators, like the guys, like, I don't know if you follow people like Filet or what's his name, Micah, the guy from the Golden State fan. Yeah. Anyway,
Los.
Yeah,
Los,
famous
yeah.
Los. Who make these basketball videos, and you know, that's where you go to for your reactions now at this point. I hadn't put that together, and that's
and it's still not the same, right?
No, it's not.
It's still not the same. I mean, look, we're going to get back into buildings soon, and it's going to be okay. We'll probably have a really good laugh about this a couple years from now. Like, wow, you remember that time when they put like a Zoom meeting behind the bench and they had like Peyton Manning and Charles Barkley pretending to eat popcorn? We'll probably have a good laugh about it. But right now, I really wish people could see what I'm seeing in person, because it's really, again, we're talking about the Hawks. I know you wanted to talk about Atlanta United, but it's really exciting. And I think it's the real thing. I think this team's going to be really, really good. And I just wish that especially for the Hawks. I mean, if you've been a long time fan, a long time season ticket holder, a member of this team, you've really had to hang in there through thick and thin, and mostly thin. And now that things are turning back around, I really think they have a right to be in there to see what they've been missing.
You know, I liked them enough to paint my wall Volt green here, and then they wouldn't change the color on me.
Yeah, well, hey, the Volt green, the numbers were a little difficult to read, so I wasn't sorry to see the Volt green.
I'm glad that's gone too.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is, but it was just like, what color could differentiate the Hawks from these other teams? And Volt green was it.
Yeah, that might have been trying just a little bit too hard. I really liked their 2015 uniforms, which still had the blue, but had the Pac-Man.
Nice.
Yeah.
So they got rid of like that spread eagle hawk, and they had the Pac-Man and the blue lettering and the red trim. I thought that was the best look they had.
That was
and
clean.
Then they went and changed it.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about these five stripes real quick. With our new coaching hire and Joseph obviously coming back at full strength now, because this is going to be 18. How long has he been off? Because he went down very early in the season, correct?
Yeah, February 29th.
Okay.
So it's been almost 11 months.
Yeah. So how optimistic are you for the five stripes for this upcoming season? Because I know as fans, we saw a different five stripes than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I think they were really, really affected by the pandemic and the really unusual nature of what they had to go through on a day-to-day basis, because you had so many players on this team whose families weren't with them. They were in a foreign country. It's just, it's tough. It's different. You have a lot of people who don't make a permanent residence here, and you're dealing with a lot of things off the training ground that just make things tougher. The team didn't get along with Frank DeBoer, their coach. I thought you saw them play at a different level, a higher level, when they played with Stephen Glass, who was someone they really respected. Gabriel Heinze will come in and really command that respect right away. So I think that will ratchet up the level of play. But I did not expect they would have as much trouble as they did playing without Joseph Martinez. I knew it would be tough. I didn't think it would look as bad as it did. But the good news is Joseph is going to be back. And Joseph went through a very cautious, deliberate rehab process that I think he's going to come out of stronger. And they're not rushing him back. They could have rushed him back. They could have tried to get him back at the end of this regular season and then into the CONCACAF Champions League. I think they correctly judged that it probably was not worth the risk to do that. So now, all of a sudden you're getting one of maybe the three best players in the league back. It's not like you have to spend any free agent money for him or make a trade. You're basically adding one of the top three players in the league. I think everything will fall into place behind him. We saw Marcelino Moreno do some really inspiring things in his limited work before the season ended. I think they have a decision to make about Barco if they can get the right offer for him. But if they don't, I think he could absolutely be a great facilitator. I think Lennon will be a great combiner with Joseph Martinez in the same way that Julian Gressel was. So if they stay healthy, that's a big if, but if they stay healthy, I think they can get back to the level they were at in 2018-19 extremely quickly. This is not going to be a multi-year thing. I think Joseph makes that much of a difference.
Yeah. Right. So that was going to be sort of our next question. Like, what should our expectations be? Are we going to be back, from a top-down perspective? Are we going to be back to the winning ways that we were spoiled with? Or is it going to be more of a middle of the pack to above average feel, or,
Well, I think Atlanta United will contend for all the titles they can possibly contend for this year. I think they'll be that good. but I also think the rest of MLS is catching up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that's good for the league.
Right.
Like I saw a report today of Ozil maybe going to DC United. I mean, that's crazy. DC United is not one of the big spending clubs in this league at all. They haven't even hired a new coach yet. They've been looking for a coach for 4 months. So now you're talking about a unambitious club making a very ambitious move like that. I think there's been a little bit of a race to keep up with what Arthur Blank has done over the last 3 years. And the good news for the rest of the league is they are starting to catch up. So it's not going to be easy to get to the level that you were at in 2018. I think Atlanta United could potentially this coming year be as good or even better than they were in 2018 when they won the MLS Cup. But I think there are probably going to be 7 or 8 other teams in MLS who are going to be significantly better than they were in 2018. And remember, that was not an easy path to the Cup for Atlanta United. They did not win the Supporters' Shield. They had a lot of trouble against New York Red Bull. They had trouble against Toronto that year. There were a couple bogey teams that really, really made life difficult for Atlanta United in 2018. And I think that's going to be the case again in 2020 because the rest of the league right now is trying really, really hard to keep up and not lose ground to what Arthur Blank has tried to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
And just lastly, just for the people listening, what are some names that we should be listening out for, new acquisitions, or just some players that we might not expect that we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens with Jackson Conway. Signed a homegrown deal, and then as an 18-year-old, scores his first professional goal on his first shot against one of the best goalkeepers in this hemisphere, Memo Ochoa in Club America. So, he showed with Atlanta United too his quality, but I mean, to immediately step in and look that poised with the first team, I think he's a very confident young man, and the sky is the limit for him. And he is going to be a homegrown success story for Atlanta United. The question is going to be, how much is he going to play?
Right.
Because you are going to have Joseph Martinez back now. If this team stays healthy, there might not be a lot of opportunities for Jackson Conway to play, but I think he's ready for it, and I think he can help this team. Bello is not a new name, but I think he's someone who is going to take a massive leap this year, especially as he gets more time with the U.S. men's national U23s. He's probably going to go to the Olympics with them. He'll be in Olympic qualifying. That national team time can be either a real detriment or a real benefit to a player. I think it'll be a real benefit to George Bello. Efrain Morales, I don't know how much he'll be able to play with the first team this year, but he's in the team now as a homegrown. Tyler Wolff, I think, will get more opportunities. He made the most of his chances with the first team in the preseason and regular season last year. But to me, Jackson Conway is the one that I'm really, really eager to see if he gets the playing time in 2021. I think he could even play as a second striker behind Joseph Martinez. And that could be very, very interesting in a situation where if you need to find a goal late for a win or a draw, you're putting a lot on an 18-year-old, but if Joseph's going to be your decoy, Jackson could end up scoring some pretty big goals for this team.
Right.
That's exciting. So I know we ran a little bit long there. I know we had a lot of questions, Mike. We could keep you as long as we wanted, you'd be here all night.
Time well spent. But
I definitely want to thank you for coming on and giving us the opportunity to kind of pick your brain personally and professionally here. And you were a great guest. I'll say that. You were an awesome guest.
Well, you guys made this fun and easy, and I hope our listeners enjoyed it too, but it was a real pleasure being on with you. And I just looked at the clock and realized we've been on for, good Lord, an hour and 46 minutes. If anyone listened to all of this, wow, give me a follow on Twitter and let me know, because you're probably more of a fan of me than my wife and dogs.
So 2 questions before we let you go. We want it, since you are a foodie as well, what local restaurants here in Atlanta would you hidden gem wise, let's not go too mainstream with it, but what hidden gems would you, or just one, would you recommend here in Atlanta?
Yeah, my 2 favorite restaurants in town both closed. Staple House. Now, I know Staple House is technically open, but it's not really a restaurant anymore. It's more of a market concept. And Restaurant Eugene, those were my two favorites. I'll tell you what, there is a Korean barbecue place in Doraville that I love called Miss Goji, and it's in the shopping set. Have you been, Ryan?
Yeah, Marco and I have been, actually.
Okay, I love that place. We get the what do they call it, like the sampler, where they give you a little bit of all the meats, basically. I love that place, and it is it's immaculately clean, and the service is outstanding, and they take really good care of you, and the prices are relatively reasonable. I love Miss Goji. If you're into Korean barbecue, I think the best Chinese restaurant in the city is Tasty China, up off Franklin Gateway in Marietta, which is very near Atlanta United's training ground. If you like very spicy Szechuan food, that is the place to go. I think they're amazing.
I'm going tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, are you? Oh, Marco.
I mean, I need to now because I love spicy Szechuan.
well, that numbing chicken is literally numbing. And it's a hole in the wall. I mean, it's a little bit hard to find, and it's not fancy. But I think we are blessed with just incredible Asian cuisine in our city, between what we have on Buford Highway, as I mentioned, with Tasty China. But Miss Goji, that's really become, like, we go to Iberian Pig a lot, but I think everyone knows Iberian Pig, right? We'll go to it's a chain, but J. Alexander's, we go there a lot. We really like them a lot. But Miss Goji that's really become our spot, my wife and I. And we've finally been able to get back in there since everything kind of went crazy in March, and we've been there a few times, and they're doing the social distancing really well, and they're keeping it really clean. So I strongly recommend them.
There's a place here. It's actually not Doraville. I'm going to tell you where. Let me tell you. It's Chungman. I believe it's in Doraville as well. I could be wrong, but they do chicken. And they do like let me tell you exactly what they are.
Scoville?
I tell you. What's that?
Scoville?
In Duluth. That's where they're at. Oh. And they do a fried wing. It's Korean. I believe it's Korean. I'm going to get this wrong because I'm forgetting what it is. But it's the best Asian-styled fried chicken wing that we've had. And we tried them on like a recommendation about 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And since then, we probably ordered them close to 10 times.
And what's the name of the place?
Chung, CHOONGMAN, man. And it's in Duluth.
Chung Man. Okay. I'm not far from Duluth, so I'll give them a shot.
They do a whole fried chicken as well, but we get the wings. And it's garlic soy chicken. Tigudak wings. As
okay.
My wife tells me how wrong.
Okay.
But yeah, very good. Highly recommended. I would definitely recommend them. They're off of Pleasant Hill.
Okay. Yeah. I'll tell you, speaking of Pleasant Hill, it's another chain, but I love going to Melting Pot every now and then. So next time I'm up there, I'll give them a shot.
So
yeah, definitely lots of food places here.
Last thing we wanted to ask, do you have any advice for listeners who may want to go down the journalist or broadcasting path?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. I think, first of all, you have to be realistic about, and I know the three of you know this very well, don't expect to do this and get rich. Don't do this for access to games or athletes or anything like that. You're in it for the wrong reason. You have to be very realistic that this is a high hour, high stress, low pay job. But if you love sports, if you're really passionate about it, then it's a great profession to be in. It's been my profession for 25 years. And like I said, I'm so lucky. It's stupid. I love doing it. But I think you need to have a very positive and willing attitude that you're going to have to do a lot of things. And this would be the case in any job. You're going to have to do a lot of things you don't like doing. There's a lot of things I do in my daily routine that I don't necessarily like doing. I don't like doing an hour of statistical research every day, but I have to do it. I don't like, I hope this doesn't get me into trouble. I don't like having to listen to a press conference of a certain college football coach of an ACC team in the city of Atlanta who gives you nothing of substance for an hour other than to basically sell his program, and then you have to find something newsworthy out of that. I don't enjoy doing that. So that, and you know, you all know who I'm talking about. So there are aspects of any job you aren't going to like, but you have to be willing to do everything to get the opportunity to do what you want to do. I think if you prove yourself to be someone who's going to be reliable, dependable, and willing, I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you can get opportunities, because there are so many people in our profession who are very, very comfortable in their job, who are not willing to do the things they don't want to do.
Yeah.
And those people end up being very, very replaceable. So just be realistic about your situation. Just be realistic that you're not going to get rich doing it, but you're going to have a lot of fun doing it. And my final piece of advice is try to find a mentor in the industry who has a lot of experience, who you can use as a sounding board. I mean, I turned 40 years old in June, and I still have a group of professional mentors that I turn to a lot to bounce ideas off of. You're always either getting better or getting worse. You're never staying the same. I'm always trying to get better. And that's why I lean on people who are better than me to guide me and give me advice on what I can do better. Please don't enter this industry thinking that you know how to do everything, because I promise you don't. And no one in this industry knows how to do everything. And it's important to lean on mentors you trust who can guide you, give you advice, and help you get better.
Awesome. Sensational. Thank you.
Who's your NCAA champion this year? Or who's your, I mean, not NCAA champion, your who's going to win the college football championship this year?
Alabama.
Alabama. All right.
Yeah. Come on, you're going to get a Penn State guy to pick Ohio State? No way. Yeah, I think Alabama may kill them.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it's going to be close.
I hope it's a good game, because I love college football. It's my favorite sport. And I always really love entertaining championship games. There's nothing like that drama, but I just don't see it this year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, that does it for us. So thanks again, man. This was great. It was great having you on. It was great information. You know, it was very enjoyable. So we are Fish and Grits, the podcast. You can find us on any of your streaming platforms. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube. We have just concluded our final Falcons post-game report, so we're going to be taking a break from there, but you can also watch our episodes there. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks again, Mike Conti, for joining us.
One more thing. I do want to say today was the you can't really see this, but it says Pistol Pete. But today, unfortunately, was the my camera's messing up. Was the day that he passed. I just want to give a big shout out to Pistol Pete, the pioneer for the combo guards that now rule this NBA. You know, and an Atlanta Hawk legend. So I just want to make sure everybody knows, you know, to remember Pete Maravich today.
Awesome. All right, guys. We shall catch you next time. Peace.